Hi, Mariana.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to be here today. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yes, I'm so excited to have you on today and to just have a beautiful conversation that I know is going to be so supportive of the listeners here. So let me just kind of open it up to you and um, would love to hear what you want to share about your transformation story because I know you've had like a few, as all of us, right? Those kind of turning points in life. And so I
Mhm.
would just love to kind of just hear where you feel led to share, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Um, well, my story kind of starts a little ways back. So when I was 18, my dad passed away. He had been having back trouble and we didn't know what was wrong, and he had gone to like multiple doctors, and finally they gave him an MRI and they realized that a portion of his spine was like disintegrated. So basically they had to redo his back and like reconstruct his spine. Um, and it was really hard at the time because I was 18, I was a senior, and I was just kind of muddling my way through high school. I was involved in a lot of stuff. I was on the swim team and I was involved in like yearbook and all these kind of things. And so it was just stressful, nonetheless. And so we found that out in September. My dad got an official diagnosis, and then we had him for 9 months. So he passed away in March. So that all kind of happened. And then after that, I started having a few problems. I couldn't walk. I was like, I don't tell this story a whole lot, but it was to the point where like I had taken a bath because I just was so sore everywhere. I could not figure out what was wrong with me. Like my ankles, my wrists, everything hurt. I mean, my hips hurt so bad. And I thought, I'm just going to take a bath. It'll help. I'll feel better. And I couldn't even get out of the bathtub. Like my mom had to come in and help me. And that was like my lowest low point. At that point, I just, we didn't know what was wrong. And so I went to a specialist for like arthritis and things like that. They did a bunch of blood tests. They thought I had lupus. They thought I had this. They thought I had that. Come to find out, none of that was going on. And she diagnosed me with an unspecific cause of arthritis because she couldn't figure it out. And so they put me on steroids. They put me on arthritis medication. And if I would have known then what I know now, I would have known that it was just stress, and that it had just built up in my body. And I hadn't talked to anyone like a therapist or anything like that at the time. I was just holding it all inside, trying to figure it out on my own, like my mom was taking my dad to treatment centers of America in Chicago, and they were gone a lot. And I was kind of staying between my sister's house and a friend and all these things. And just, it was stressful. I mean, especially for someone that's young that doesn't know how to deal with stress, or like muddle my way through it. So that was what kind of happened from that. And then once those things kind of subsided, because I was on steroids and I was on medication and it was covering up the problem, I never really figured it out until later in life when I started to have those issues again, what they were. But after that, I ended up doing a few things, and I ended up staying home and going to school in town. And I ended up working because I thought, hey, I need to go get a job because my mom's by herself now and all these things. And so it really started with my dad's death, though, that um, kind of like propelled me to almost like have a different outlook on life of like, I have to go do these things myself, and that it's kind of on me as a person. And so after that, things kind of unraveled. I want to say I almost had like a dark night of the soul. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Things just kind of started falling apart. I My college boyfriend, who we were very serious, he broke up with me. My heart was broken. Things kind of just started happening one after another. I was on schedule to go to school for teaching, and I was just like, didn't know what to do with myself. I was just in this stage of my life where I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And so after that, I switched my major like 3 times, couldn't figure it out for the life of me. I mean, I went to nursing, to business, to like all the things, wasted so much time, wasted so much money. And then I met my now husband. He was not my husband, obviously, at the time, but he's a sweetheart. We ended up together. And we ended up getting married. I'm going to give you the condensed version. And anyways, so it's so funny how things come around full circle, because all of these things that happened, I could have never imagined they would lead to where we are now. I could have never imagined that, my very serious college boyfriend breaking up with me would lead to me meeting my husband like 6 months later, and then us getting married a couple years after that, and then having my daughters. So just very full circle. But I feel like my dad's death really just spiraled me into this kind of like, I felt like it almost had to happen to put me on the right path. Does that make sense? And so I feel like that was like the major transformation that really propelled all this happening. And we can talk about the stuff that happened later, obviously, or that's going on now. But I felt like that was like the main part of it. That was like, the very beginning of everything that happened.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I just want to say, like, oh my goodness, like my heart just was like so blessed by that whole like share that you had, like just how like difficult that must have been for you as an 18-year-old to like meander all that. And it's like now, you can talk about it and it's like there's a little bit of like lightness there, but I can imagine at the time it just being really heavy and hard, and you not realizing, because like the chronology of your story, right? You're like, my dad he had this diagnosis and then he passed away, and then I'm like having all these physical things and I can't walk, and it's like it's all related, right? Like the stress, and now, like you said, now I know, but back then like I didn't know. And a lot of women, a lot of people, like their bodies are physically in pain, right? Like, oh, this hurts and this hurts. And I don't think we associate the pain with like, well, what kind of stress are we under?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I didn't even, obviously, because I was young and I just didn't know any better. But now every time I start to like feel pain in any part of my body, I'm like, what's going on? Like, what is going on? Where is this coming from? Like, why am I having like I'm meeting like an upper limit right now, right? Like there's something going on. I don't know what it is. And my dad's death, I want to say, as painful as it was, and it is, and death is painful, and in people's grief, I mean, it takes time and everyone's grief looks different. So I will just start by saying that. I feel like maybe I don't want to say an easier time, but it was definitely different because I was younger and I was just starting out, I feel like, in life on my own. So his death kind of like, I feel almost set me up to be stronger, just because I'm like, this was really bad. I mean, this was like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, my dad took care of us. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had never worked. I didn't know what we looked like. I didn't know what a working woman looked like. And that's not to say that my mom didn't do an amazing job. She was there for us. We never went to daycare. We never did any of those things. Right. And I'm not saying that daycare is a bad thing. I don't want to ever have anybody think that, but we never went through those things. Like, I never had a working mom. I didn't even know what that felt like. And then to have my dad pass away and then be kind of funneled into like this situation of like, oh, now I need to go to work because I have to help support myself and all of these things. It was very different. And it was I'd never seen that before. And it was literally like doing it messy, like figuring it out like as I went, and looking back on it, it's very full circle. And I can totally see that it all needed to happen right when it did. But in the midst of it, it really was, it felt like a mess. I mean, it really felt like a mess. Like I felt like I was floundering,
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like that is one of the lessons that we're here to learn, which is that like, no matter what happens, because there's going to be contrast, right? There's going to be the pain, there's going to be the loss, there's going to be things that happen that hurt, that are hard to go through. But what you said was like, now looking back, I see how like, that happening allowed me to like step into like, okay, now I need to take care of like things. And like, and that for you was like a positive thing, like that, um, that kind of like, I don't want to say pushing you, but like that kind of momentum, right? For you to do those things. And how in life, like if we can get to the point where our faith and trust is so strong that literally like no matter what happens and no matter how painful it is or how hard it is, if we can have that faith, like, and it's like, we hear this a lot, right? Like that things are working out and that like it's going to be okay. But like it actually is true. Like, what if all of those things, like you said, even like the breakup and like are leading you exactly where you're supposed to be?
Mhm.
And if we could have that faith and that belief, like while it's happening, like what a difference like life could be.
Oh, absolutely. And I've learned that now. Like now I have an undying faith that like what's happening is meant to happen, even if it's really crappy and there's a lot of contrast around it. I'm like, this has to happen. It's got to be for some reason. And even if I don't know right this second what it is, it's probably like got something to do with something that's coming up. And it had to happen. As painful as his death was, it had to happen. I would not be who I am without him passing. I would have stayed, I would have gone away to school. I would have met somebody completely different. I wouldn't have met my husband. I had plans, you know what I mean? Like I was set up to go to Michigan State University and I was
Mm.
set up to do all these things and I didn't. After he passed, I was like, my mom needs my help. I'm going to stay home. Like I'm going to do these things. And put the pressure on myself, of course, to like make things the way they were supposed to be. But the way it lined up, it was perfect. It was perfect. As perfect as it wasn't in the moment, now it is. And
Yeah.
I see that.
So, I mean, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, how do you get to that point where you're like, okay, like I have this faith? Because I resonate with so much with what you shared. Like, I feel the same way. Like in the fall of last year, I was put on full bed rest and I was only 20 weeks pregnant. And I was like, okay, so for the next, 20 weeks, knock on wood, God willing, like I will have this baby inside of me and I will be on bed rest. And that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
Because I knew that, and it wasn't like that happened instantly. Right. It wasn't like I was like, oh, yes, I'm on bed rest. Everything's working out. Right. I'm so thankful. I have so much faith. Right. No, like we're human. Right. Like we're going to have moments and things that trigger us and fears that come up and doubts that come up. Right. But then to get to a point where we can sit with whatever situation we're in and be like, oh my gosh, like I know this is happening for a reason. And we get like curious, like, what is that reason? Like, let's get excited almost, right? Like, what's going to come from it? And so many beautiful things came from me being on bed rest. Like, I feel like my ability to like just meditate and surrender and like be in the moment and like really it just was like amplified and just in a beautiful way. And then like I started this podcast while I was on bed rest. And so
Yes.
like I gave birth to like this, this beautiful podcast. And so many good things and beautiful things came out of a really difficult situation. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on like how do you get to that place where like how do you kind of build that muscle, that faith muscle where it's like how many times do we have to go through something challenging and difficult and get to the point where we can actually be in the situation and be like, okay, I have faith, like this is working for a reason. Like, how do you kind of get to that point?
So I feel like it is definitely a practice. Like you said, it's also kind of realizing that normally when you start to butt up against something, or I don't want to say bad things because I don't think that anything is inherently good or bad that's happening. I think it just is what it is. And it's happening for a reason, no matter what it is. So I think if things are happening, or maybe things are falling away or unraveling, or maybe like there has been death, or even if it's not, even if it's something on the other spectrum, right? Where it's like maybe it's a birth of something else. It's one, just understanding that things are changing and evolving all the time, all around you, even if you're not changing and evolving. And eventually you have to change and evolve because you're meant what you're meant for, and it can't pass you by. I feel like it just comes around again, and it's just going to keep coming around until you either learn the lesson, embrace it, or figure out what you're supposed to be doing. In the case of my dad passing, that completely changed me. I mean, I was not the same person. I mean, before I had been a kid. I mean, honestly, just a kid. I was a kid with like no worries. And then, not to say that I started worrying immediately, but after that, it was like I kind of got a glimpse of like what things could look like, what they did look like, and where I was and where I wanted to be. I mean, and you have to look at that, because if you want something so badly and you keep coming up against contrast, you have to be willing to, one, do it messy, two, step past the contrast and look at what the good side could look like too, and hold that faith for yourself. Because even in the midst of like the stuff that goes on that people don't see, right? Because everybody's really seeing just a highlight reel of your life. I mean, honestly, when we get on Instagram and things, I mean, it really is a highlight reel, right? Like they're not seeing that. And it's stepping into like the midst of all the mess and realizing that you can grow, right? You are going to grow through it, and holding the faith that like things still grow. When you plant something deep down in the dirt, it doesn't see sunlight right away. It grows a while and then sprouts through the dirt, right? Like there's a level, there's an upper limit that you're hitting at some point, and you have to grow through that. And for me, my dad dying, I mean, although I didn't see it in the beginning, it was still an upper limit. I was changing into someone else. I mean, it propelled me to go after the things that I wanted, because I did realize how short life was. My dad died at 54. I mean, I'm already 33. And when I look at life and I think about the things I want to do, I'm like, well, I'm just going to go do them, because I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You know, like, oh, wow. I mean, and for me, sometimes it's looking at things and thinking, I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, honestly, am I going to die? Like, am I going to jump out of a plane? Probably not, but that's not something I want to do. But if it's something someone really wants to do, I mean, they have to weigh their options. And that's totally dependent on every person. Everyone is so different. And I think just holding the space for yourself and realizing that it is going to be okay. Like, it's going to be okay, and it's going to work out just the way it's supposed to work out. Even if you don't see it right in the middle.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love that, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Like as you ask that question. And yeah, just like holding on to your faith no matter what's going on. And I think, I would love to hear kind of a little bit more of like, what are the tools that you use? Like when you're in that situation, you're just like, oh my gosh, like, here we go. Like it's something, and okay, like I know that I've got this faith. I know that I believe that like it's going to work out, but like what kind of gets you through, on like a day-to-day basis, those like challenging moments?
So I think a lot of it is, one, just a very firm belief that like the things that are happening for a reason, and it's not controlling it. It's not pushing it. Like the timeline is right where it's supposed to be, right? It just is. It is what it is. That is all that there is to it. It doesn't matter how much you push for something to happen. Okay, so I know that I'm a branding photographer now, right? So my daughter is 4.5, my youngest. So 4 years ago, I started a Facebook group, more of a spiritual kind of Facebook group. I wanted to do the work, right? I wanted to lead women. I wanted to help women wake up and realize that they're meant for more. That's not just about this wake up and work mentality every day of like doing the 9 to 5 grind, right? 4 years ago though, as much as I wanted that, it was not meant for me then. But now things are happening, and they're happening a lot faster than what I even thought they were going to. Like, I've started my podcast this year. I've done the things that I've wanted to do. I've stepped into the branding photography role because it's what is meant for me now. If I would have tried to do it 4 years ago, I would have been burnt out in 2 seconds because I had a newborn baby, a 4-year-old at the time. My husband was working crazy long hours, working every single day of the week. It was miserable. You have to realize that the timeline is set the way it is. You don't need to push. If you have the inspired idea and things are still contrasty, it's going to happen. But some of the tools that I use, since that was your original question, sorry to get off
No, but I love,
I
love that, you
get
know,
off
and
my
like, the
soap.
whole- yeah, no, I love that divine timing, because I think, you know, especially as like, right, manifestors and like learning about manifestation
Yeah.
and really like being intentional about it. That's like a huge thing that's not really talked about a lot in manifestation world, is like divine timing. Like, yes, we have our desires and we have our vision for what we want to see in our life. And that's why I love the idea of like being I want to say a little flexible, like that just word just came up, but like, yeah, being flexible about like what it looks like in the moment, because sometimes it doesn't look exactly how
Yeah.
we think it's going to be, but that's okay.
Mhm.
And it's really the
Right.
why, like, why do we want it? Because if we can focus on why we want something, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. And eventually it may end up looking like what we think it's, you know, supposed to look like, but usually it's like even better. It's different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's so, okay. So like going back to the tools, like for me, one, it's holding the vision that it's going to work out the way that however it's supposed to, even if it's not my way, right? This isn't my way or the highway. Okay. This is like
Yeah.
God's way, source's way, universe, whatever you believe in. This is like a higher power way. Like, and it might look better than you've ever dreamed it would look, right? I could not ever picture that my dad's death would spiral off a series of like 10 years of like things lining up for me. I could never have told you that just why, like, well, you know, why such a big, I don't want to say a big negative thing in our life, right? Like, I mean, it's not now, but it was at the time. Why such a big negative thing to propel so many good things though? But out of that death came the birth of so many amazing things. My husband finding me, my 2 daughters coming out of that. And that's all divine timing. That was all meant to happen just when it happened. So for me, tools, I meditate a lot. I meditate every day. I journal every day. I ask myself where I am. I also ask myself where I want to be. And am I doing those things? Like, that's really important because manifestation is great. But I think, especially people that are just starting out on that manifestation journey, because I've been there and I've been through that. When I started out on that journey, I thought it was just like God was a magic genie and was gonna drop anything in my lap, right? Like, oh, I want this big nice house. Like, okay, I'm just gonna envision this big nice house every single day until I get it. That's not what it's about. It's about one, you're right, the feeling that's coming out of it. Why are you craving the big house? I wanted the big house because I wanted to feel free. We lived in a really small home at the time. And it's just like, I wanted those things because I felt trapped. Like I wasn't in love with my life. You know, like what can you do to become in love with your life? That is the biggest thing for me. Like, how can you love your life? If you don't love it, then you need to change something about it. And with manifestation, it's not about just sitting and wishing. I mean, you have to go be the thing that you want to be. I mean, it's action. For every intention, there needs to be an aligned action. Does that make sense? So like if I'm
Absolutely.
going to wish for a bigger house, then I'm going to go align the action to get the bigger house. And this isn't about like work and grind every single day until like, you know, my hair falls out. I mean, that's not what it is, right? It's taking the aligned action in the moment when it feels good to me, and then things will line up. And it really does. It really, really does. Like, I just had a yoga studio reach out to me about branding photography. I've been wanting to photograph a yoga studio. I put out the attention a couple months ago. Again, back to the timeline. Like, it's not always on my perfect timeline, but now it is because now I'm wrapping up a few things in my business and letting go of a few things, and now new things are coming in.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
it's really just understanding that, again, like just holding the space. It's just holding the space through the contrast, through the dark period, whatever it might be, because you have to go through the dark in order to get to the light anyway. I mean, there has to be equal. Without dark, there is no light, right? I mean, it's back to the contrast.
Yeah.
Contrast in everything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. You have like so many gems that I wrote down.
Sorry, I was just like,
No,
I just
I
brain dumped
love
on you,
it.
Katrina.
No, it's like, what can you do to fall in love with, what can I do to fall in love with my life? Like, how many people really ask that? And I do think, you know, after like one of the beautiful things that came out of COVID is that people are starting to ask this question more, right? That's
Oh
why
yeah.
people are,
Mhm.
changing careers and doing things and like, selling everything and like going and traveling for a year or whatever. It's like that is, and I think that's an illustration of this whole conversation, right? That
Mhm.
things that, are difficult or challenging or quote unquote bad, like beautiful things can come out of it. And yeah, and I think that's just an example of that. But I love this conversation so much. And I'm so happy to have chatted with you. And
Me too.
what a, like, you're such a beautiful soul and you have such a
Oh, thank
strong,
you.
like, you just have such a strong faith and you're such a leader, an example for all of us on how we can really just go through life with this beautiful like dance of like everything's working out and like how can I fall in love with my life more? Like, are you kidding me? Like that's just so beautiful. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. Are there any last words you would like to share? Any takeaways before we jump off? And then of course I would love for you to share kind of like where people can learn more about you and find you as
Sure.
well.
If I had to leave you with advice, oh, it's just go after what you want. I mean, and I know everybody says that, but life really is short and it really does go by so fast. And I feel like the older we get, the faster it goes.
Mm,
Like
mhm.
when I had my oldest daughter, I would think like, gosh, you know, this is taking forever, kind of like, especially when you're a new mom, right? And you're like in the midst of
Yeah, they
it
say
up
like
all
the
night.
days are
Yeah.
slow, right? And the years are
The days
fast.
go by so slow and you're just like, oh my gosh. But literally I blinked and she's almost 9 and my youngest is 4.5. And I can't even believe it. Like, it's just wild to me. And if anything, it has inspired me more as a mom and a parent to do the things I want to do, to show them to do the same. So
Oh, I
go
love
do what you
that.
want.
I love that. I have to share this really quickly. In the car, I was asking the kids, like, so what's your intention for today? We always like try
Oh,
to do something. And maybe we're not always saying our intentions. Maybe we're breathing or we're reflecting. But today I was like, okay, what's your intention for today? And my daughter
mhm.
was like, to have fun. And my son said, to have a happy and excited day. And then my daughter was like, yeah, fun and excited day. And then they asked me, like, Mom, what about you? What do you want for your day? And at first I was like, oh, like, I thought like the word productive came to my mind. I was like, no, like, I don't want that in
Oh,
my
get out of
mind. I was
here.
like, no. And
Yeah, I know.
I was like, I'm going to go with you guys. I'm going to go fun, happy, and excited. Like, and yeah, and I'm so thankful that I got to have this conversation with you today, really about that,
It
in a
was
beautiful
meant to
way.
happen. Perfect
Yes.
timing.
And
Perfect
then
timing.
just before we jump off, if you could share where our listeners can find you, and we'll share it in the
Sure.
notes as well.
Of course. I am on Instagram at Marianna Johnson photos _ branding. I'm at mariannajohnson.com. And then I am at Wild Heart Awakened Soul podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to
You
talk to you again.
have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.